Hello there, I'm Jamie Vegas and this is how to create an RPG in Unity, and welcome to episode 36. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at creating that dungeon that we've spoke about over the past couple of tutorials, and we're also going to build a way to actually get into that via our cave right here. Don't forget, click the subscribe button and click the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial I upload in this series, and indeed everything else I upload on my channel. With that in mind, let's get to work. So at the end of the last tutorial, we created this second scene, which was area 2. That's going to be our cave. Obviously, this is the entrance to our cave. And in here, I would like some kind of like a trap door that allows us to open and go down into the cave. So the premise of what we're going to do here is we're going to get ourselves a trap door to place here. And much like we have with the sign all the way back at the start, we're going to give ourselves the option to press E and go down into that cave, which will then take us to the second scene, the actual dungeon cave that we're going to build, and obviously we'll have everything with us, our health, our sword and everything. So in order to do that, let's get ourselves some assets. So let's head to the asset store. As always with the asset store, you can either shop on the old store or the new store. I prefer the old store if I'm honest, but if you want to go with the new one, just click here. And if you're on the new asset store and want to go with the old one, there'll be an option just here on the top right. Now there is a cool free asset called Decrepit Dungeon, which I really like. And if we search for it in the asset store and click on free only, there is a paid version if you want to go for that one. Obviously get more assets with that one. But for now, if you just want to do it free, this free, or the light version as it's called, will do just fine. It is a great piece of asset, and my hat goes off to the creator of this. I had no input in this. This isn't a promotion, it's not a paid promotion or anything. This is something I like and that I would like to use. So if we click import or download or whatever, it will bring it into our game, and I've already gone ahead and done that so we don't waste any time waiting for it to download. So in here we have some prefabs, and we're looking for a door. So if we go to doors, there are a couple of different prefabs that we could use. The specific one we're going to use is a trap door, which is actually door D. So we can drag and drop that into our scene. Let's probably make it a little bit bigger. So let's have 1.5 by 1.5 by 1.5. And it could do with the fact it's fairly flat on there. That might do the trick, no problem. So there we go, there is our trap door. So like I say, that's going to be what we use to go into the actual cave. So let's set up that trigger now to allow ourselves to trigger this sequence of going down. And we can do that real simple, as we've always done with any kind of looking trigger, just a simple cube on there. Bring it into place, somewhere over trapdoor. In fact, I'm going to turn post-processing off, so I can see what's going on exactly. It's amazing how dull a game can look without post-processing sometimes. So let's increase the size of this all the way across. It doesn't have to match exactly, because you relatively need it to cover the same kind of area. As long as we've got the basis covered and we have the option to look at it and go down. I'm going to decrease this to probably about 0.1, so it's fairly small, and bring it to about there. And let's turn off the mesh renderer. So there's our trapdoor set. Now, if we go to our scripts folder, all the way down here, if I can remember which script it was that is attached to our board. Tell you what, let's quest 01 notice. It's not, is it that one? Let's head all the way back over there and get ourselves acquainted with the actual object that's attached that we can kind of duplicate. Because why rewrite code all over again when we can just kind of copy it? So the quest 001 take script, which is attached to this, if we click it right here, so hold Control, press D to duplicate, you'll obviously get an error because it is not the same name as the class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my scripts folder. In fact, I'm going to drag the script to my scripts folder initially, and then create a new folder within the scripts, and we'll have this as scene changes. And then let's drag that quest 001 into scene changes. Now let's rename this and have it called Open World 2 Dungeon. And then open that up in Visual Studio. So all we've done at this point is replicate a script or duplicate a script that we've already written previously. We can just modify this to make it more, well, versatile. We need it to do something a little different rather than just look at a board. We need it to take us to a different scene. So it's obviously going to be relatively small, but the core mechanics of this script are already written. We don't need to write it again. We don't need to waste time writing things again. We already did it. So the first thing we need to do is change the public class name. Make sure we get that right first time around. And it was Open World 2 Dungeon. Next thing, let's add in using Unity engine.scene management namespace, because obviously we're going to change scene. And here what we need to do is go down gradually line by line and just make sure we are doing the right thing here. So void update the distance, that's fine. On mouse over, we don't necessarily need to have the block sword, so we can cancel that out. What we do need to do is have action display and action text sorted. So if we go back to Unity, it's been quite a while since we've dealt with this kind of mechanic, so it's always good to kind of brush up on what we're doing here. And on notice trigger, if you remember, action display is that action character, which is E, which never changes, and action text is the one that says at this point read notice. We need that to change. We need to actually make that say, what do we need to make it say? Let's have it say enter dungeon. So we need to go back to our actual script, and then we need to add in another variable, a namespace, which is using Unity engine.ui semicolon, because we're going to change what that text says. So it's action text dot get component in spiky brackets text open close bracket dot text equals enter dungeon semicolon. So that's all sorted. So as we go further down, let's take a look at what else we need to deal with. So we don't really need the mini map, so we can delete that line. We don't actually need that. That can go. So that also means that the variable up here can go. We don't need to lock the cursor, and we don't need the sword blocker because we're simply just entering another scene, so they can go as well. Cursor.visible, that can go. So obviously when we press the E button, this is what's all happening here. So yes, we need that to go away. Yes, we need that to go away. UI quest.set active, we don't need that, so that can go away, which means it can go away up here. Notice cam can go away, so that can disappear. And you'll see what I mean. We've kind of already reduced everything here. This script is great because we've literally already typed this out, and we can just go through it quickly line by line, erasing things that we don't need. We don't need to change any of this quest stuff here. That's fine. And I guess I'm going to keep the player as an option just in case, but we don't really need it active, but we may do later on when we add a little bit of effect when we go into dungeon. So I just want the mechanics of this to work properly before we carry on. Finally, we can get rid of this line here, attack blocker. That doesn't need to exist. And finally, let's save our scene. So one thing to also note here, by the time, I say save the scene, save the script, I'm getting ahead of myself there. By the time we actually get to that cave section over here, we will already have the sword. The sword will be with us by default, so we don't need to worry about having to deal with things like that just for now. However, things will make sense when we get into the next scene. So we just need to attach that open world to dungeon onto that cube. Let's set those variables. So action character is the action display. Action text is, of course, the action text. And finally, the player is indeed the FPS controller. Now we have everything pretty much done for this now. I'm going to rename this and have this just simply called Dungeon Trigger. And let's save that scene. Now what we need to do is head to our new scene, area 002, and currently it does look like that. But I'm going to go to build settings and add open scenes, and this is number 3. We could theoretically drag and drop it here, but let's actually build a little bit of area 2 while we're here before we actually test things out. Now, because we're going to use some nav mesh again, well, theoretically we can use a cube on with nav mesh, but I think it's best if we use a terrain, because obviously a terrain is a bit more versatile. So once again, let's go to 3D object and terrain. Now the great thing about this is the Decrepit Dungeon has textures that we can use, an abundance of textures for all of this. So it just helps us out a little bit more rather than have to import new textures or whatever. Let's take the main camera, and although eventually we're going to have the FPS controller in here, for now I'm just going to move the main camera around a little bit so we can see a little something. So let's at least have something within this scene before we decide to switch over to it. So terrain, let's add here. Obviously, if you're in a much newer version of Unity, the terrain has changed. You'll have a little drop down menu here and you can select down here. I do have a video on how the new terrain component is now. Personally, I prefer it this way. I'm currently not a fan of any version of Unity after 2018.2. I don't feel they offer as much variation, you could say. So let's add edit texture, add texture, and let's add in gosh, what textures do we have? Do we need to have one of these textures? We could always add in this wood texture if you wanted to, or we could stick with what we already have in one of our textures. Dirt. Let's go with dirt. Let's have that, and let's add the normal map and click add. Let's zoom in a little bit and see what it looks like. That's not too bad. Okay, so while we're on this bit now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very quick look at some of these prefabs that we can use. So let's go to walls in the Decrepit Dungeon and let's bring in wall A. And yep, that looks all good. That's pretty nice. So let's hold control, press D to duplicate, and let's bring it this way. Now you'll notice that it doesn't align perfectly. That's just the way these walls work. It's entirely up to you whether you want to stick with any of the prefabs that you're given here, or whether you want to modify your snap settings. I am personally not going to do that. I'm actually going to use a cube to kind of build a little maze kind of thing for the dungeon, but I guess that's entirely up to you. So for now, all I'm going to do is just duplicate these a couple of times. Let's have a look at a couple of props that we can kind of just drop in. Again, it's just a case of you play around with it. You know, you don't have to do exactly what I'm going to do. But a lot of the next tutorial is going to be design mechanics and theoretical work, like what you could do, what you shouldn't do, what things should go somewhere. So I've just quickly placed that there. And if we look at the main camera, let's kind of bring this into a place that we can see. So that'll do for now. So I'm going to save that scene. It's the next tutorial that we're really going to build this dungeon because it's going to look cool. So let's head back to our initial scene, which is area 001. And let's head to our dungeon trigger. And now let's modify this script further to actually take us to the next dungeon. So what we need to do is when we have the action button down, which is right here, after we've got rid of everything, what we're going to need to do is say scene manager dot load scene, and in brackets it was number 3, I think, was it? let's quickly double check that. I think it's number 3. It is indeed number 3. So let's save that script. So now that is going to work perfectly. I'm kind of going to skip a little bit of the game at this point, but you could imagine getting to this point when we've gone and got our sword, we've killed the spider, we've turned our quest in, and now we get to go into this dungeon. So that would be where we kind of pick up. Final thing I'm going to do before we try this out is take the canvas and take the event system from this scene, copy them, go to our new scene, which is the dungeon, and paste them here. I'm not going to do anything else just for now. I'm just going to paste them there, head back to area 1, save that dungeon scene, and I'm now going to take our player, and to cut things short a little bit so we're not kind of wasting time going through the whole routine of doing the quest, I'm going to put our player here. So imagine we've done all this, we've done the spider, and we're on our way to that dungeon now. Obviously at this point we would have our sword in our hand ready to attack anything because we've already picked it up. You know how it goes. So after all is said and done, be over here on our way to the cave. Sinister looking cave. Head in. And it doesn't want to work for us. Why does it not want to work? Why is it not working? Let's check. So, dungeon trigger. So it's saying that we are quite a distance away from it for some reason. Okay. Okay. Well, what we could do is we could actually take the trigger itself and we'd actually make it a lot higher. So let's say 4, bring it up. So now we should hopefully have the option of entering it. Let's try once again. So we're going to have the dungeon trigger active there. Now let's head all the way over. Keep going, nearly there. There we are, enter dungeon. So now, there is our dungeon. So, a couple of things I want to point out here before we carry on. You'll notice that the minimap is indeed there. However, we need to change a little bit of this. You'll notice that the thing in the middle, a little cursor, is there. Our health is indeed there. So everything we've transferred from that actual canvas is here in the scene. Obviously, we do need a little bit more work to get it all working, but that's something that we'll discuss next time when we come to managing the scene and taking everything over. So, the way you could think about it is we could actually take our first-person controller as it is now, copy that into the new scene. So let's paste him there, and let's bring him all the way over to where the dungeon is likely to begin, which is there. There we go. So you'll see just how this can work, and let's turn off that main camera. Head back to area 001 and press play. So a lot of this is going to be kind of testing. You'll be testing many different things, like many routines and everything, to kind of see how things go. So hopefully this should work perfect this time around. There we go. And you can now see our minimap works because we actually have our first person controller there. So the minimap in this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to play around with it more, but that's something for future development. So next tutorial, what we're going to do is we are going to kind of build a little bit of a fade in and a bit of sound effect to entering that dungeon, and we're actually going to build that dungeon up. So we're actually going to have a dungeon to play around with. So we're going to do a lot of design work. But what I'll do as we go through all that design work is I'll explain what kind of design would be relative to that dungeon, how you could use it, and also different things that we could do. So yeah, until that next tutorial, guys, you get some assets ready. In fact, you could even probably start building a nice dungeon. You could, start running with that now. But there's so much more we still need to do in this world. I kind of want to not stick with one section just for now. I want to kind of mishmash between the two because it'll lead to fresh new ideas. So until that next tutorial, guys, thank you very much for watching.